Hi, I'm Robert West, and this training video explains how to use the Human Behaviour Ontology within the Behaviour Change Intervention Ontology to describe behavioural outcomes in behaviour change intervention scenarios. In the Behaviour Change Intervention Ontology, we have an entity that we call the outcome behaviour value. This is a number such as a percentage which represents what we measured and reported to be the way that our study population has behaved in a given scenario. In the example shown here, it is the percentage of the study sample using tobacco from 7 days following a target quit date, let's say in a trial of a stop smoking support program for 26 to 28 weeks. By inference, we can say that the percentage abstinent over this period is 100 minus this number. Now let's look more closely at what we want to use the Human Behaviour Ontology for. We want to be able to characterize the outcome behavior in a way that maximizes precision, discoverability in searches, and comparability across different research studies. And we do this by what's known as annotating a study report, protocol, or database with ontology classes and expressions that represent all the key aspects of the outcome behavior. Just to be clear, the behavioral outcome value is a statistic that represents the behavior of a study population that's been assessed using a methodology and reported in a particular way. This video will describe the annotation of the statistic and the outcome behavior. The description of the methodology, including the analysis, will be left to another day. I'm now going to take you through the 5 steps to characterizing behaviors using ontologies, and particularly the Human Behaviour Ontology. The first step is to decide on what class or classes you want to apply to the behavior of interest. These may be specific, such as cigarette smoking, or broader, such as travel behaviour or child rearing behaviour. An important thing to remember is that behaviours can be classified in many different ways for different purposes. Thus, walking can be a travel behaviour, a health-related behaviour, an expressive behaviour in the case of protest marches, and so on. The Human Behaviour Ontology classifies behaviours according to what will always be true for them, but you can annotate with other classes for outcome behaviours that you're interested in. For example, if you're interested in walking as a health-related behaviour, you can annotate using walking and health-related behaviour. The development of the Human Behaviour Ontology and the classes and relations it uses are all described in this paper in the Human Behaviour Change Project collection published in the journal Welcome Open Research. And I strongly advise you to study the article, which will probably answer many or all of your queries. You can just Google the title to find it. So for this first step, you go to the Human Behaviour Ontology and try to find the class of behaviour you're interested in. It may well not be there in precisely the form you're looking for, though, and in that case, the thing to do is to explore the hierarchy of behaviours to find one or more classes that will apply in your case. We'll be adding more specific classes in an ongoing way so that over time it's more and more likely that you'll find the precise class that you're looking for. This slide shows the most general classes of behaviour as displayed by the Ontology Lookup service. There's a reminder of the link to this on the slide, but you can always Google Ontology Lookup service to find it. And just put individual human behaviour in the search box. Click on the little arrows next to the labels to see the subclasses of those behaviours. It's a good idea to explore this hierarchy so that you can get a sense of what behaviours come where. For example, tobacco use behaviour comes under material entity related behaviour because it necessarily involves using a product, in this case a tobacco product. In fact, all consumption behaviours and substance use behaviours come under this very broad category. You'll see that there are 2 classes that don't have subclasses, and these are habitual behaviour and normative behaviour. And that's because these have been added as examples of behaviours that are defined not by what they involve, but by the mechanisms bringing them about. So they could apply to pretty much any behaviour. By far the most frequently studied behaviour is physical activity, as it's often referred to. And this has to be treated in a different way from most other classes of behaviour, because of course all behaviours involve some level of physical activity. This means that it's not a behaviour as such, but an attribute of a behaviour. Some behaviours involve a lot of effort and energy expenditure, while others involve practically none. The way we've addressed this, as you'll see in a minute, is to define classes of what we call behavioural attributes. That is things about a behaviour that are important or useful to describe. We can then, for convenience, classify physical activity as any human behaviour that involves at least a certain degree of physical effort. The next step is to make clear what level of behaviour we're talking about. Are we talking about a single episode of behaviour of an individual, or are we talking about repeated behaviours, what we call behaviour patterns? Or are we talking about single behaviours of groups of people or populations? Or are we talking about behaviour patterns of populations? Ontologically, these are all different. In most studies, we're talking about behaviour patterns of populations. Thus, outcome behaviour values will typically refer to the percentage of people who engage in a particular behaviour, such as exercising, walking, smoking tobacco, etc., repeatedly. This step should be pretty straightforward. If you don't apply one of the three classes in the red rounded box, the assumption would be that you're talking about a single individual human behaviour. The third step involves identifying relations of the behaviour you are interested in to other entities. You can find all these relations in the paper I mentioned earlier, but obvious ones relate to the start points of behaviours or behaviour patterns and their end points. You'll see one called occupies temporal region, which is essentially the duration of a behaviour or behaviour patterns. Happens during is a bit different. This tells you over what period of time the behaviour is occurring. For example, tobacco use over a 6-month period. So the tobacco use is not taking place all the time during that period, but it's taking place on at least one or more occasions during it. And you'll see that there are lots of other options for describing behaviours in terms of how they relate to other entities. So to carry out this third step, you can search for the relation of interest in BCIO search or the ontology lookup service, and then see if you can find the class for the entity it relates to, and put the two together in a simple expression. It's possible that you won't find the exact entity you're looking for, in which case you can just put a term or phrase describing it using what's known as a literal. In the case of this example, we've created the expression starts 7 days following the target quit date, and this forms an expression, and we put brackets around it to show that the two parts of the expression go together. By convention, we put single quotation marks around terms that involve more than one word, and this enables the computer to know to treat everything in the quotes as one term. To cover the period over which we're interested in tobacco use in our example, we can use happens during and specify a literal, which is, in this case, 26 to 28 weeks. This isn't ideal because ideally we'd want to be able to express this more formally, but that's something that we're currently working on. You may have noticed that one of the relations in the Human Behaviour Ontology is called has behavioural attribute. And this allows us to describe ways in which classes of behaviour might be enacted that could be very important. For example, it allows us to distinguish behaviours that are impulsive from ones that are not. So far, we've identified 6 main classes of behavioural attributes. One that we call behavioural form, which allows people to describe the physical way a behaviour is done. For example, if it's smoking a cigarette, we could describe the way that the cigarette is smoked, such as the depth of inhalation of the smoke or the puffing pattern. As alluded to earlier, a very important attribute is the amount of physical exertion. This should be treated as a dimension, and so, for example, could be linked to a data item such as the rate of calorie usage, or more commonly METs, or metabolic equivalents. We also specify 3 subclasses for low, medium and high level of physical exertion. And for mental exertion, we have subclasses of cognitive and emotional management exertion. So do check out the publication on this for more detail. The final step is specifying the statistic being used. This would typically be a percentage, a mean or a median. We often also want to include statistics relating to dispersion, such as variance, standard error of the mean and so on. And those can be added just as an annotation. Let's just see how we can put all this together in our tobacco use example. For a given BCI scenario, or behaviour change intervention scenario, such as a study arm of an RCT evaluating a behaviour change intervention, we have an outcome behaviour value. What this value refers to in this example is set out in the box on this slide. We can use the steps then set out in this video to annotate that value in a way that makes clear what it refers to. As yet, we don't have the ontology classes to describe the methods and reporting, but we can describe the statistic, the class of behaviour, the level of behaviour, for example, whether it's a behaviour pattern, relations that tell people the start point and the period over which the behaviour is being considered, and other things. Note that we've not specified any behavioural attribute because with tobacco use in clinical trials, we're usually not interested in the way the tobacco is used, just whether or not members of our study sample have used it. So to recap, we can use the Human Behaviour Ontology to annotate study reports, protocols and databases to describe what the outcome behaviour value refers to. In this video, we've just considered the behaviour itself and the statistic used to describe it. In time, we'll also have ontology classes to cover the way the behaviour was measured and how the data are analysed and reported. The 5 steps of this process are outlined here. First of all, you specify the most specific behavioural class or classes that you can. You specify the level in terms of individual, population and one-off behaviour or behaviour pattern. You specify any relations such as the start point and period over which the behaviour could occur. You specify any behavioural attributes, and then finally you specify the statistic. We've covered a lot of ground in this video and there's been a lot to take in. I suggest that you read the publication describing the Human Behaviour Ontology and then come back to this video to refresh your memory. Then have a go at annotating an outcome behaviour value from a paper that you're writing or one that's of interest to you. We have a BCIO support group that I strongly advise you to join because it gives a great opportunity to share experiences and ask questions. We're at a very early stage in the use of ontologies in behavioural science, but things are progressing rapidly, and I hope this video has given you enough to go on to have a go at using the Human Behaviour Ontology in your own work.